Hey guys, this is Jimmy, and I'll welcome you back to another video for you guys today. So, to kick things off in my Wrestling Reimagining series for WCW 1999, so we're going to kick things off by tackling the January pay-per-view event entitled Sold Out. Now, before we get a little more into the actual card, I might as well just kind of backtrack a little bit and to kind of give a somewhat of a prologue going into this rebooking of WCW in the year 99. So basically, this booking will take place the night after Starrcade 98. From that main event, Kevin Nash shocked the wrestling world by defeating Bill Goldberg to become the World Heavyweight Champion. But it wasn't without some controversy surrounding the finish. Now, Goldberg had been undefeated ever since he debuted in the company, but now all good things seem to come to an end. Goldberg being pinned in the middle of the ring, and Kevin Nash being the one to break Goldberg's winning streak. That also came with the expense of Scott Hall interfering in that match as well, so that's also another important aspect to add into that. So Kevin Nash goes on in a promo the night after Starrcade, goes on the mic to announce the controversy surrounding the interferences and, including his best friend Scott Hall. So to address this kind of issue, so Nash issues a rematch against Goldberg for the world title the following week on Nitro, the first Nitro of 99 held at the Georgia Dome. January 4th rolls around. Now, there will be some minor adjustments along the way, but it plays out mostly the same. But some of the things that we will alter on January 4th. So for starters, Goldberg will not be put in a position where he has to opt out of the match. So he's not getting arrested because of some alleged incident. So we're not going to put Goldberg in some questionable, odd situations there. Therefore, the eventual rematch between him and Nash is still going to go on as accordingly. Ric Flair, who had been in the middle of a feud with Eric Bischoff, so he would go on to defeat Bischoff in a rematch the Nitro after Starrcade, where the winner of that match would become the WCW President. Or in this case, since Bischoff was already the president, so if he were to lose, then he would be relinquished of his duties as president and Ric Flair would take over the mantle. Flair defeats Bischoff and becomes the WCW president, so that's still going to happen like how it did in real life. And also Scott Steiner would go on to defeat Konnan on January 4th to become the new world television champion. Some minor adjustments as well with Goldberg and Kevin Nash actually happening. So we're not going to rip off the fans into advertising a match that was scheduled only not to take place, but but we're actually going to give the fans what they want, and here we go. Goldberg versus Kevin Nash, the eventual rematch happens. Michael Buffer would be out there to serve as his role as a ring announcer, so pretty much a big fight feel, and Goldberg and Nash go at it for a good 10 minutes or so. Actually, before that, I almost forgot to mention that because Ric Flair is now the president, so in the moments leading into the match, he also adds a stipulation that the wrestlers that were interfering in the main event of Starrcade, which include Disco Inferno and Bam Bam Bigelow, so given that they're contractually obligated with WCW, so there would be no outside interference from any of those aforementioned wrestlers, and that if they were to interfere in those matches, that they would be suspended without pay. Now, as for Scott Hall, you ask, so by this point, Scott Hall had been booted out of the NWO, and he's not contractually obligated with WCW in a kayfabe sense, so he's kind of been looked at as kind of like the lone wolf. He's basically a man without a country. Having Scott Hall disguising himself as a security officer also kind of begs the question of whether or not Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are in cahoots once again. So that's also a plot point that also needs to be mentioned as well. Flair would go on for the record that if Scott Hall would also interfere in this match, then he would be barred from attending any WCW live event whatsoever. Goldberg and Kevin Nash, they're having a match. They go at it for a good 10 minutes or so. And then at some point, Hulk Hogan comes out. And we haven't seen Hulk Hogan in about a month. He had supposedly retired from professional wrestling. And he had stepped down from his role as the leader of the NWO. Hogan's out there, unadvertised. The announcers have no idea what's going on. Goldberg seems to have Kevin Nash beat on a few occasions. There will also be a ref bump along the way, so just to kind of give the NWO, especially with Hulk Hogan, an excuse to come out there. And since they were never barred from ringside, so Goldberg's plowing through all the NWO members. Goldberg eventually goes for a jackhammer on Kevin Nash. Goldberg goes for a cover. And then just when the referee's about to wake up, Hogan grabs the world title. He hits it on Goldberg, and the referee signals for the bell. So even though Goldberg won the match, but it was by disqualification, therefore a belt can't change hands as a result. So therefore, Kevin Nash is still your world champion. I have no issue necessarily with the NWO being back together. I mean, at first, like when I started this booking, I was kind of a bit opposed to the idea, but I think the more I start to kind of realize exactly where they were trying to go with this, I feel at the same time there could have been a lot of potential with it. But I think the explanation for the NWO's the two factions with Hollywood and Wolfpac getting back together, I think there should have been a much clearer explanation as to why they decided to kind of patch things up the way they did. So we kind of eventually close out Nitro with the NWO standing tall. But even though WCW may have lost this battle, but there will be better days to come, even despite how bleak as it may seem. So then we get to, I want to say a few nights later on Thunder, because I think Thunder aired on Thursday nights at this point. So basically, Hogan and Nash, along with the rest of the NWO, so they're basically explaining about their actions and how they managed to put their differences aside after spending half a year just going at each other's throats, but now they're all buddy-buddy once again. The past several months has been pretty much of a rocky road. There's been basically no denying just how much that the NWO have struggled since they split apart, that they all have their different principles, and just a matter of clashing of personalities played a big factor as to why, Kevin Nash set off into forming his own NWO faction, and Hulk Hogan also kind of focusing on his thing. So then we get to Scott Hall, because they actually played this ridiculous storyline in '98 where they were bringing up his real life alcohol issues, and Scott Hall just not being mentally stable. I mean, as distasteful as it was for WCW that they were doing during this time, but the thing is that Hall had been going through some personal troubles, basically troubles in his personal life, and so by the time the holidays came along in December with Christmas and whatnot, so Hall realizes that that his demons have been getting the better of him, and that things haven't been the same since Hogan and Nash decided to branch off in their separate ways, and Hall being kind of like sandwiched between the two alpha males. He's kind of at that point where he's breaking down, and Hogan and Nash and the rest of the NWO realize that Scott Hall needs help and that we have to be together. And basically explaining why Hogan and Nash decide to patch things up and to make amends overall. Now that Kevin Nash is world champion again, it's like all the gold's back in the NWO. I mean, it seemed like we were all falling apart, and after spending many months just going back and forth and having our egos get the better of us, but now we realize that we need to be a family again. So having Scott Hall to kind of be sort of bridging the two opposing factions back together kind of gives you sort of that sense of unity that the NWO had when they originally formed and continued to dominate WCW programming throughout 1997. That's kind of the explanation regarding about that promo that regards about the NWO's merger into the Elite. As the NWO announces their merger, there's one wrestler within that group that opposes to that, and that happens to be none other than the Giant. So, realizing that, Kevin Nash is back with the NWO once again, and just even despite, the Giants' history with Kevin Nash and the reason why Nash, almost ended his career when he used that jackknife powerbomb to a point where Giant accidentally had his neck snapped. So there's a lot of that grudge and animosity going on with, as far as Giant's hatred towards Kevin Nash. And so, we bring that up once again. The story pretty much writes for itself. If you go back just 1 year ago at this very same pay-per-view when Kevin Nash did the unthinkable and then powerbombing the Giant. So we're actually going to bring that full circle. And so that's going to be kind of like our main event, but that's not going to be the kind of main event that's going to close out the show. And I'll get a little more into that as the video progresses. Yeah, so Kevin Nash agrees to take on the Giant. He's going to defend the world title, but not with the expense that if the Giant loses, then he would no longer be competing in a WCW ring ever again. So now we get to the actual card. So for Sold Out, the first match that I want to have to open up the show is going to be Chris Benoit going one-on-one against Chris Jericho. Now, you have the two fellow Canadian friends, both trained at the Stu Hart Dungeon, very similar wrestling styles. So just want to have a match to really give the fans really excited and to kind of kick off the pay-per-view to, with a strong competitive match. Not much build-up, but this is basically the first match on the card, so there doesn't necessarily have to be the build-up doesn't have to be very sophisticated or anything like that. It's just basically two guys going out there have a match. So Benoit by this point is now a Horseman once again. The Horsemen got back together back in September. Chris Jericho just off the heels of his run as TV champion, so he has his bodyguard Ralphus. So he's gonna do what he can to distract the referee and to do whatever it takes to ensure that Jericho wins the match. Eventually there's a bit of a miscommunication along the way. It's going to make it seem like Jericho has Benoit's number, but then Benoit counters Jericho's moves, and he's going to go for the crippler crossface, allowing Benoit to pick up a victory. So Benoit's going through a winning streak to kick off 1999 as far as some of his matches are concerned. So he's going to be competing on Nitros and Thunders to rack up those wins, and he's going to continue that success here at Sold Out. So then we get to our second match. So Bam Bam Bigelow is going to take on Ming. So you got two muscle-bounded wrestlers just tearing each other apart in the middle of the ring. So Bam Bam had debuted back in November, but hasn't competed in a WCW sanctioned match just yet. But all that changes here at Sold Out. Ming is kind of like his own man. So the Dungeon of Doom had been long since disbanded. So Ming's kind of his own man. And, both these two behemoths just going at it. It's not going to be a long match per se. The point of this match is to really get Bam Bam Bigelow over and to prove that, that he is he's the better man in the ring. So just kind of a bit of a tune-up, just kind of, get Bam Bam racking up some wins. So this is kind of his WCW pay-per-view debut. And so he's going to win this match here. So just to kind of make him look strong headed into the next pay-per-view. So then we get to our third match. So this is going to be the Cruiserweight title. So Billy Kidman going as the champion heading into the new year. And he's defending the belt against fellow friend Rey Mysterio Jr. So this is a one of those interesting matches that actually stands out for a bit, because considering that this is more of the friendly competition, face versus face match. So something that stands out from all the other matches that are booked on this show. Yeah, so basically these two guys are going to tear up the entire ring. No, not literally, but, just do what cruiserweight wrestlers do and just to put on a great match. And so that match goes on. Very hard fought bout. A lot of near falls. We put Mysterio in a position where he could potentially win the match and the title in the process. Even despite his efforts, it's not enough for him to lay out Kidman and to successfully win the match. But, Mysterio put on a hard-fought bout, but at the end of the day, Billy Kidman comes out on top. We could have Mysterio try to go for a roll-up, but then Kidman counters into a roll-up of his own, allowing him to get the 3 count. So Billy Kidman walks out of the match still the Cruiserweight champion. So Kidman and Mysterio shake hands in mutual sportsmanship. The LWO come out there and ambush the two wrestlers from behind. So even though by this point Eddie Guerrero, having been the leader of the Latino World Order, so shortly after Starrcade he was involved in a car accident. So this is to a point where Eddie Guerrero was sidelined during this time, so he wouldn't be able to compete for the next several months. Basically leaving the NWO in an uncertain state, I guess you could say. Basically, even though the LWO lacks a leader, but they're all together, that they want to continue on the LWO, continue on Eddie's vision, knowing that even though they're out without a leader, that they want to insist to continue pushing forward and to also kind of continue stretching the rivalry a little longer between them, along with Kidman and Mysterio. So there we go. So now we get to the next match, which will be Booker T taking on Stevie Ray. Two members of Harlem Heat going at it one-on-one. By this point, Stevie Ray is now a member of the NWO. Booker T just being his own man. He had been establishing himself as a solo competitor since the beginning of '98, even capturing the TV title on a number of occasions. There was also a period during the summer where Booker T would be taken out of action, and during that time, Stevie Ray would eventually sell his soul over to the NWO. So by the time Booker came back at the end of the year, so, Booker's still siding with WCW. He's questioning Stevie Ray's choices, and as far as, his involvement with the New World Order is concerned. So Booker doesn't necessarily agree with his brother's choices, but at the end of the day, he fully respects his choices. Even though they're on opposing sides, but deep inside, they still have each other. Blood's thicker than water. That kind of brings us into, the current state of the NWO, now that they're one enormous organization once again. Stevie Ray's kind of at an impasse. So he's put in a position where he's having to decide whether he's part of the NWO or whether he is with Booker T and WCW. So he's kind of between a hard and a rock place here. So the pressure's on Stevie Ray, and eventually this will lead us into this one-on-one bout here at Sold Out. Wouldn't be the sexiest match booked on the show, but it's a very story-driven match, so that kind of writes itself, and it really helps sell this match. Being that Harlem Heat had been multi-time tag team champions up to this point, so we're also going to make that known as well. But yeah, so they have their match. The NWO try to come out there and to encourage Stevie Ray and to really, make attempts to kind of support him through and through. But, Stevie Ray's like, no, I got this. You guys stay in the back. I want to fight this on my own. Let me fight my battles for once. Mostly the NWO team members will just head to the back, even despite that they're willing to, support Stevie Ray and potentially help Stevie out. But Stevie doesn't want that. That ends up biting him in the ass, and Booker T would successfully defeat his brother in the middle of the ring. Stevie is in tears. He just has no idea where he goes from here. But yeah, the NWO are basically not pleased. So that's actually going to get to a point where Stevie Ray gets kicked out of the NWO. Booker T still riding high, just coming back from his injury that he had. So just really having Booker T kick off 1999 with a bang as a solo act. And I want to continue to build Booker T into the superstar that he would eventually become. So now we get to our next match. So Konnan taking on Lex Luger. Now this was a match that they ended up doing here at Sold Out in actuality, so I'm actually going to keep it here. I would probably book Lex Luger's heel turn a bit differently. So what's going to happen here is that after the NWO's merger, so let's say the following week after the January 4th show, Luger and Konnan are together. They're kind of in a weird position because like they're both NWO members, and and Wolfpac and Hollywood are back together. Luger and Konnan are given this promo by Mean Gene, and they both kind of give out their reaction as far as the merger is concerned. So Konnan's kind of like in this position because like he represented Wolfpac because he felt like he wasn't given the kind of opportunities that he should be having, that that he was a big star in Mexico and willing to expand over to the United States and to really kind of expose Latino wrestling over to the States and to continue to be like the megastar that he already was, but now to kind of branch out in the mainstream, especially when it comes to wrestling in North America. He feels that no matter who you are, no matter what size or nationality that you are, like anyone can be on top. Like anybody can do what it takes to be like a credible guy, a credible world champion. Now, as for Lex Luger, so Luger joined the NWO initially because he kind of had to spend nearly a year being overlooked by the fans, and like Luger joined the NWO because he wants to be number one, like he wants to be a winner, and like being the first guy to take the world title off the NWO, but he kind of feels like the fans just didn't give him enough credit, and his best friend Sting would end up bringing the world title back from the NWO, and Luger's kind of like, I was the one that did it first, but you guys didn't care, so I joined the NWO. But I had no hard feelings against my buddy Sting and all, but I did what it had to be done. And this doesn't really sit well with Konnan because now it's being, now the dissension's becoming more apparent. Like there are cracks between the friendship between Konnan and Luger. So by the time they have a match later that night against the Outsiders, so Luger turns on Konnan, and this leads to a 3-on-1 beatdown. So on Thunder, the Go Home Thunder to Sold Out would be where it's announced that at Sold Out that Lex Luger would go one-on-one with Konnan. So Konnan's officially out of the NWO, and Lex Luger remains with the NWO as far as like the newly formed NWO Elite. So they would end up having the match. It's kind of one of those issues with Luger and Konnan because they actually didn't get along in real life, it seems. But in an ideal world, I would do my part to ensure that Luger does what he can to put over Konnan. And to, even though like Konnan is actually not going to win this match, but we're kind of going to get to a position where Konnan could still look reasonably credible enough that that he can that he can take on the big boys. Konnan's gonna lay some offense. He's gonna fight out of the torture rack, and Luger just doing everything he can to take him out. And Luger also has his share of offense as well. And Luger got that torture rack on Konnan, but Konnan fights out of it, which kind of stuns Luger because it's very rare that people would fight out of his submission finisher. So then this kind of gives Lex Luger kind of, giving Lex Luger in a position where he ends up resorting to some dirty tactics. So therefore, we also bring up the steel plate, going back to his days as the narcissist in the WWF. So he's going to use the steel plate to knock out Konnan. So he's going to do the flying forearm that he does, and he's going to go for a cover. And the referee's like the referee doesn't know this about it, since it's basically him taped up in a wristband. So the referee has no idea about it, since it's just basically Luger has like his signature wristbands on. So basically, kind of the ref is just completely oblivious about it. So Luger knocks out Konnan, gets the 3 count. Luger wins the match. Crowd boos. So there you have it at that. Next up we have is the United States Championship match between the champion Bret Hart, and he's defending the belt against Perry Saturn. So Bret Hart had been holding that belt since November, late November, early December, having won the belt from Diamond Dallas Page. So Bret Hart at some point got sidelined due to a groin injury, so he had to take time off for the rest of 1998. So by the time January rolls around, Bret Hart's back and he's ready to do battle. Hart has been monitoring all the young up and coming talent. One person that he ends up taking notice happens to be none other than Perry Saturn. Bret Hart sees potential in Saturn, so we have the match. Saturn's been on a roll ever since he broke away from the flock, even beating the leader of the flock in order to disband the group, and coming off the heels of his feud with Ernest Miller. So now he's going into 1999. He's looking to capitalize on his momentum by challenging a big star like Bret Hart. Yeah, this is actually going to be a match that I think would be one of those like hidden gems. I think people would take notice as the years would go by, but this could be the kind of match to be one of those hidden gems over the years if they were to have compete. Oh, I know I'm getting my words mixed up here. If they were to compete, but I don't recall them ever having a match with each other. But this is a scenario where you could let a match like this happen. Yeah, so they end up having this, and Bret Hart being Bret Hart's gonna utilize his expertise. I mean, he's known to have a pretty good track record when it comes to these kinds of matches and making all these like unknown wrestlers look a lot more credible than they actually are. So it seemed to be kind of one of those track records, but Saturn was a solid worker and was actually over for a time. No doubt in my mind that I think these two could put on a clinic of a match. So yeah, Bret's gonna beat Perry Saturn despite Saturn's efforts to wear out Bret, but we could have Saturn try to lock in the rings of Saturn, and then Bret Hart fights out of it. Bret Hart trying to go for a sharpshooter on multiple occasions, but Saturn's finding ways to fight off that submission hold. So like some occasions maybe he'll just attack Bret Hart and he's like plowing him with punches, preventing him from doing the move, or maybe he counters into a roll up as well, so almost getting a near 3, but Bret barely kicks out. So we could have stuff like that going on. But at the end of the day, Bret Hart's going to come out on top. He's going to lock in that sharpshooter once again. And after multiple attempts, he manages to successfully lock that in, allowing Saturn to reluctantly submit. So therefore, Bret Hart is still your United States Heavyweight Champion. Now we get to our next match. So this is actually going to be a 6-man tag team match. So we have Hollywood Hulk Hogan along with his nephew Horace and Kurt Hennig, and they're taking on 2 members of the Horsemen with Ric Flair, Steve McMichael, and a wild card wrestler. Now, originally I would have had 3 members of the Horsemen, but one of them being Malenko, but given that he was sidelined with an injury during this time, so we're kind of left without a third man. And I know some saying, well, about Chris Benoit, can he be doing double duty? I'm not going to have Benoit overwork himself. So, Benoit had his match with Jericho early on. So instead, we have Diamond Dallas Page taking over the mantle and as an honorary member of the Horsemen. So just for this one night, and DDP being the mystery guy to take Malenko's spot in the match. Hulk Hogan's had a grudge with Flair. Hennig being, given his history with Ric Flair and having turned on him in that War Games match, causing Flair and to disband the Horsemen. So Flair hasn't forgotten what Hennig has done in the past. And yeah, so they never really got a chance to give a payoff to that Flair-Hennig feud also. Hogan still has his beef against Flair for, having humiliated his buddy Eric Bischoff. So now he's kind of at a point where he's forced to do his chores and, and Hulk Hogan just seeing Bischoff in the position that he's in just makes him sick to his stomach. So that's also kind of another thing to really make note of. So yeah, so this is going to be a 6-man tag team match. Just want to really utilize some talent that was not featured in the actual sold out card to also be featured on there as well. What we're going to have is like Ric Flair is going to be the legal man. He's going to lock in that figure 4 on Curt Hennig. Hogan tries to break the hold, but then he gets eaten by a diamond cutter by DDP. Mongo, Hogan, and Horace are going at it at ringside. So this distraction allows Flair enough time to apply enough pressure, causing Hennig to tap out of the figure 4 and allowing his team to pick up a victory there. Then we get to the first out of the 2 doubleheader main events, and this is going to be the WCW title versus career bout between the champion Kevin Nash taking on the Giant. So I already discussed about this earlier in this video, so don't need to reiterate once again, but they did have a match. I believe the Go Home Nitro that sold out. So instead, I actually had it here on the January pay-per-view here. So yeah, so after spending a whole year in the making, so now it's come full circle. So this is the rematch from the previous year sold out. You have these guys going at it, and we're gonna have a typical interference from the NWO. So they're coming out there. Giant's gonna fend them all off. Kevin Nash takes advantage of this, hits a jackknife powerbomb for the 3 count. And except unlike the previous year, Kevin Nash does not botch the powerbomb. So Kevin Nash hits his finishing move, gets the 3 count. Referee was already preoccupied enough as it is. So those factors combined, Kevin Nash comes out on top. He still retains the world title. The Giant is no longer contractually obligated with World Championship Wrestling. So I know some folks are wondering, it's like, this match isn't closing out the show? It's like, what are you thinking, Jimmy? So it brings us into the real main event here, and this happens to be the match that actually did take place in the actual sold out show, and that happens to be Goldberg versus Scott Hall. So like Kevin Nash versus Giant, this pretty much speaks for itself. And, Scott Hall had cost Goldberg the world title the previous month at Starrcade, and Goldberg's out for revenge. So that's basically your story there. And, basically writes for itself. Goldberg defeats Scott Hall, even uses the taser to Scott Hall, just kind of uses tactics against him. And then post-match, Bam Bam Bigelow attacks Goldberg from behind. He's like continuing to pummel him down. Diamond Dallas Page comes out there as he chases Bam Bam through the crowd, kind of continue on with Goldberg's path of destruction and, going after the guys that screw him over in the first place. And, Bam Bam being one of those guys in his hit list. Goldberg's got Scott Hall taken care of. And, basically close out the show right there. So this is pretty much the first of the many installments for my reimagining of WCW 1999. What do you guys personally think about it? And, I gladly appreciate some feedback. For my next video will be the February pay-per-view, which will be entitled Super Brawl 9. And look forward to seeing you guys there. And till then, thank you all for watching. This is Jimmy signing out.